In Project 6-4, we will look at the recovery of a Linux system. If your Linux system does not boot properly, or you need to do file system recovery or changes, such as maybe setting the volume label on an XFS file system, you will need to boot up off the installation CD. Just like a Windows installation CD, they give you the option to go to recovery mode and access the local hard disk for editing files and managing your system. The first one we will look at is our CentOS 7. With the virtual machine shut down, click on your CentOS 7. On the right side, we need to insert the DVD for CentOS 7. So look under your storage section and click on the optical drive. Then make sure that you have CentOS 7 checked, or that it says CentOS 7. Now you can start the computer or the virtual machine. It will come up, and for CentOS 7 you have to go down to troubleshooting. So use your down arrow key, highlight troubleshooting, and hit enter. On this screen you'll go down to rescue a CentOS system. So hit enter after you have it highlighted. After a few moments, your CD or DVD will load. And the first question it asks, do we want to try to find the system, the root file system, and mount it? In this case, we're going to pretend like our file system is corrupt and we need to scan it. So if our file system is corrupt, we don't need it to mount into RAM because we can't scan it while it is mounted in a read-write or an accessible mode. So we're going to skip this step. Use your tab key to tab over and select skip, hit enter. Now when we're in this section, some of the commands to use would be fdisk, if you have a less than 2 terabyte hard drive, that is, -l/dev/sda, and we'll look at our file system. So here's all of our partitions. We note the asterisk under boot for SDA1, so that tells me that the at least /boot folder, if not the entire / folder, is stored on this first partition. So if the system is having problems starting up, that is one of them to possibly check if there was an issue. Normally on startup, a corruption, it will tell you what SDA and the number that is having trouble. So just look at your error messages on the screen to see what device is causing an issue. Of course, we're not really having an issue in our system, and we'd also need to know what file system that we're using. If we're using the ext, or if we're using some other file system like the ZFS or XFS. CentOS 7's default is XFS. Any older versions of CentOS or Red Hat use the ext file system. So for this one, we need to use the XFS repair command. And if you do have file system corruption, it is good to open up a web browser on another machine or your tablet or smartphone and read up on file system repair and recovery and what tools and steps to take. So I'm going to do an xfs_repair/dev/sda1 and press enter. This command runs through, checks the entire file system for anything that is corrupt and tries to fix it. It goes through 7 phases of checking. I'm going to clear my screen. Now, in this mode, it's not in this list, but in previous projects, I showed where that you could change the label of the file system or use the UUID instead of the /dev SDA and the partition number in your FS tab file for mounting the file system. Now the XFS requires you to set the label when you are creating the file system or during installation time. If you have not set a label on your XFS, you will have to boot off of your CD and go into recovery mode without mounting the file system to make a change for XFS. EXT, you can change it while it is running. So to show you that, XFS_admin is another command for managing the XFS file system. -L is going to show me the volume label for SDA1. As I see, there's no label set. I did not set that during installation. So if I use XFS admin -L, I can set a label on this and set it as possibly the root or system, since this is the root directory is on this partition. So I'm going to just label it root. This also helps me if I have to boot into troubleshooting in the future and I don't know which partition contains the root file system. I can then have the ability to use the XFS admin -L and look at all of the partitions and look at the labels on them to see what is actually stored on that partition. If you're setting up a production server, label all of your file systems with some type of human readable name that makes sense on what is supposed to be stored on those partitions. Now moving on with the lab, our SDA5 is an ext4 file system. We created that and mounted it on new mount. So to check it for errors, use a different checking tool, file system check. -F tells it to force check. So I'm going to /dev/SDA5 and hit enter. So it's a different tool because it's a completely different file system, has completely different structure, so I had to write another program for checking and fixing that file system. It doesn't say anything like ext check or anything, it's just file system check because that is the default Linux file system. It's been around since Linux was pretty much created. So the utility is quite short named. It's just file system check. Now to look at ext and see if we have a label on this one, you can use the dump e2fs. I'm going to pipe it to less so I can view the output. Now when I look at this, I see the very top line, file system volume name is none. So I'm going to hit Q to quit out of here. And I'm going to use a utility to modify the label on this one, tune2fs. It uses the same -L for setting the label for the file system. I'm going to name this one new mount because that's the directory it's mounted on. Now if I run the dump command again and look, it'll show the file system volume name is new mount. So that makes more sense. I can use these utilities, like I said, in the future if I get corruption and I can figure out what is supposed to be on which file system. Now the next part, after we've practiced scanning our file system for errors, is another common task is to reset the root password. You may have a server sitting somewhere in a closet that's been running for years and nobody remembers what the password is. You can boot up off an installation CD. Most of the time it doesn't even have to be the same distribution of Linux. Once it's booted, you mount the root partition. In this case, SDA1 is the root partition. So I'm going to mount dev sda1 to a folder, the mnt folder. You may have to make one if you don't have a place to mount to it. Now I'm going to use a chroot. It says basically change the root partition, the / from this live CD, everything in RAM, change it to that mount point, MNT. So change root to MNT. Now when I hit LS, I see everything that's on my physical hard disk and not the stuff that's in RAM. I see my 4user1 directory, the my mount directory, new mount, all the stuff that's on my Linux system. I also have access to all of the commands on the Linux system on the hard drive, such as the stuff in the bin directory, sbin. So I can use a command called passwd, the password command, to change the root password. So always put passwd space the user account, name that you want to change the password, hit enter, and now it is changing the password for the root account. We name it secret 123, enter it again. So the password was reset. Now we can shut down the virtual machine by typing power off. You have to type exit and then power off. Once the system is down, click on your optical drive link and tell it to remove the disk from the virtual machine. Now start your CentOS 7 back up. Once it comes up, switch to TTY2, and the direction says log in as root and secret 123, but go and try to log in as root and pass 1234. Notice you can't log in because we changed the password. And notice when we changed the password, we booted up off the live CD or the rescue mode, we didn't have to enter any username or password to get right into root access. We were able to change the password. So to use root and secret 123, we now log in as the root account, and we can change the password back at this point. So use passwd space root and set it back to pass 1234. So now that's done, we'll use our old password again. So that was just a quick rundown of how to reset a password on a Linux system. So we're done with playing with Red Hat. Now let's look at Ubuntu and see how it's a little bit different, but the same as far as recovering it. So go ahead and do power off. And then we will go to our Ubuntu 14. I'm going to do the same thing. We're going to hit the optical drive and insert the Ubuntu server image, and then click start. Here it starts up into normal mode. I'm going to go ahead and select English, and then on the menu screen we're going to go down to rescue a broken system and hit enter. What language would we like? English, United States. It wants us to run through and detect a keyboard. Go ahead and select yes, hit your Y and W key, and then no a whole bunch of times until you get to the last box that says you have a US keyboard, and hit enter for continue. After a little while it'll come up and it'll show you the default host name for rescue mode. We'll just go ahead and hit enter to continue on this. We don't need to worry about the name matching the host system. It then asks us what time zone are we in. America, Chicago. It's now asking us where is the root file system. Ubuntu set up the root file system in a volume group, in a logical volume. And here it's fairly easy to see that it is the third one down, the volume group and /root. So highlight Ubuntu 01 VG. Yours may be a different number if you're doing this in the classroom, and hit enter. And now it wants to know that we want to load the boot partition. We'll hit enter on yes, we do. And this question is wanting us to know, since we mounted the root file system, do you want to go ahead and do a chroot and execute the bash shell in this partition? Instructions said yes, go ahead and do the chroot for us. So one less command that we have to know. We hit enter and continue. I'm going to clear the screen and look at the partition. I see my disk 1, 2, 3, and 4 that I created in the last lab, so I know that I'm in the correct partition. I can use the df-h command to view the mounted file systems, the space used. I could also use the fsck on any unmounted file systems. And I can change the root password just as we did in CentOS 7. And the root doesn't have a password at this time. So type passwd space root. Hit enter. Use secret 123. And now we'll type power off. We may have to type exit first, like we did before, and go to reboot the system in the menu. If it resets and reloads the ISO image, use your device menu and remove the disk. Once that's removed, go ahead and go to the machine menu and tell it to reset the virtual machine. Once Ubuntu comes back up, this time log in as root. I couldn't do that before. And secret 1234. I'm sorry, secret 123. Now let's change the root password on Ubuntu to the same as on CentOS. So use the passwd command space root, and then set the new password pass1234. And this will allow us to log in as root instead of using the sudo su- as we did earlier in the projects. So we are done with the Project 6-4. Go ahead and power off your system.